Let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. We do recognize that many of you are joining us from various locations in the US and Africa. I'm Damali Martin. I'm the Chief for the Population Studies and Genetics Branch within the Division of Neuroscience. And I'm joined by my colleagues, Dr. Miriam Gela, who is the Program Director in the Population Studies and Genetics Branch in the Division of Neuroscience, and Dr. Minky Chatterjee, who is a Program Officer in the Population and Social Processes Branch within the Division of Behavioral and Social Research. We're delighted that you could join us today to learn more about this exciting funding opportunity to build infrastructure for Alzheimer's or AD and AD-related dementias or ADRD research in Africa. My colleagues and I will tag team on this presentation, and there will be time for questions towards the end. So this is our agenda. We will start off with a brief overview of the NIA, or the National Institute on Aging, review the RFA background, objectives, and expectations, talk a bit about the review criteria, present the timeline for submission, review, and selection of applications. Our contact information is provided at the end of this presentation, and then open it up for questions and discussion. So a few tips, and I'm just going to make sure that I don't have anything blocking the slide. A few webinar tips before we get started. Participants will be in listening mode, and you will not be able to ask questions verbally. We ask that if you ask questions, to please use the Q&A box feature. Don't put it in the chat because we're going to miss it. Put it in the Q&A, and we will answer those questions during the Q&A and discussion session at the end of the webinar as time permits. So if you have questions that are very specific to your application, we probably may set up a time to meet with you later on to discuss your application. Of course, you're free to reach out to us. Actually, we strongly encourage you to reach out to us before applying. And these slides and a recording of the slide, today's webinar will be available on our website. The link is here, but we're also going to blast out an email afterwards so that you have the link where you could access the recording and slides for your review. So let's start off with a brief overview of the National Institute of Aging, or the NIA. So the National Institute on Aging, otherwise known as NIA, is one of the 27 institutes and centers at the National Institutes of Health. NIA leads a broad scientific effort to understand the nature of aging and to extend healthy, active years of life. NIA is also the primary federal agency supporting and conducting AD research. So NIA is led by our director and deputy director, Drs. Richard Hodes and Amy Kelly, and it consists of 6 main entities. We have an intramural research programs, which provide a stimulating academic setting for comprehensive effort to understand aging through multidisciplinary investigator-initiated research. And of course, there's our division of extramural activities, which provides leadership and advice to the director on implementing and coordinating extramural research grant, contract, and training program operations and policies. The office also the division also manages operations for the National Advisory Council on Aging. And then we have 4 divisions listed below that provides extramural support for our extramural community of researchers based off the scientific areas. And today you're joined by, as I stated, program officers from both the Division of Behavioral and Social Research and the Division of Neuroscience. We also have 2 additional divisions, Division of Aging Biology and the Division of Geriatrics and Clinical Gerontology. So now let's take a look at the RFA background, the objectives, and the expectations. Here are some key definitions and abbreviations to keep in mind. Low and middle income countries in Africa refers to African countries with low, lower middle, upper middle income economies as defined by the World Bank. Cooperative agreements are indicated by a U mechanism in the activity code or the mechanism, and this allows participation of NIH program staff beyond the normal stewardship of the award. We will often refer to Alzheimer's disease as AD and Alzheimer's disease-related dementias as ADRD, and request for applications is abbreviated as RFA. So according to the report, Africa Aging 2020, which was done by the US Census Bureau, the number of older Africans aged 60 years and older is projected to triple from 74.4 million to 235.1 million between 2020 and 2050, with at least 2/3 of these countries counting 1 million or more in their populations. And this growth will outpace that of any other region in the world. While not currently experiencing the largest AD and ADRD burden for all LMIC regions, Africa is expected to undergo a significant increase in the number of new cases due to the increase in the elderly segment of the population. And so we really want to get ahead of this problem. So despite this, Africa was identified as a region that stands out as persistently lacking in Alzheimer's disease and AD-related dementia research in terms of the number of studies relative to the population size. So in a study that included a meta-analysis of older people at risk for developing age-related dementias, about 42% of total person years came from Western Europe, 24% came from North America, 16% came from East Asia, 13% came from Latin America, and less than 5% came from South Asia, Asian Pacific, and Africa combined. So this provides only a partial view of the global AD burden. We see that there's a lack of data on the incidence and prevalence of age-related dementias, as well as the factors that contribute to the risk for or protection against AD. And this is really due to limited research of AD and ADRD in the African region. So this new funding opportunity aims to address this gap, and it aims to address the gap in our portfolio here at NIA in terms of understanding the burden of AD and ADRD in Africa. So this funding opportunity promotes collaborative research programs to support the development or enhancement of infrastructure. So by this, we mean tools, surveys, biospecimens, data, or other types of research infrastructure for AD and AD-related neuroscience research in lower middle income countries in Africa, as defined by the World Bank. The research infrastructure programs are expected to contribute to the long-term goals of building sustainable AD and ADRD neuroscience research capacity and research, with the aim of ultimately leading to prevention and mitigation strategies for AD and ADRD in Africa. And those strategies could potentially inform mitigation strategies globally, including for us in the US. So this funding opportunity will support what we call the UG3, UH3 Exploratory Developmental Phase Innovation Awards, which are cooperative agreement projects. And these awards will enable the following. It will enable the formation of transformative collaborations between institutes and scientists in the US and LMICs in Africa. It will enable the development or enhancement of research infrastructure and resources for studies of AD and ADRD neuroscience relevant to Africa, as well as to examine how social and behavioral factors influence AD and ADRD in Africa. And it will lead to the initiation of pilot or exploratory studies that may inform future research for AD and ADRD neuroscience in Africa. So this slide provides expectations for UG3, the UH3 structure of the RFA. So all projects must have a UG3 exploratory developmental phase, and a UH3 implementation phase. Applications that only propose a UG3 or UH3 activities will be considered incomplete, and these applications will not be accepted for review. Just to let you know, the UG3, UH3 award is not renewable. So this is a one-time award that will enable you to build up the infrastructure that you need to be able to come in with investigator-initiated awards in the future. The UG3 phase provides 2 to 3 years of support for exploratory and developmental activities. The proposed project period for the UG3 phase must not exceed 3 years. The UH3 phase provides 3 to 4 years of support for implementation activities, and the total project period, including both the UG3 and the UH3 phases, must not exceed 6 years. And then prior to submission, we strongly advise to you to contact and reach out to us, the scientific and research contacts listed on section 6 of the funding opportunity to discuss the alignment of your proposed work with the goals of this funding opportunity. So here is some additional information to keep in mind. The award will be made to the U.S. Institute. However, at least 60% of the budget must go to the African Institute, and we will be checking budgets to ensure that this is the case. We encourage you to send a letter of intent, as a letter of intent allows the IC staff to estimate the potential review workload and the plan of the review. However, it's not required, and what you propose is not binding, and it does not enter into the review of a subsequent application. If you are submitting a letter of intent, please include the following information: a descriptive title of the proposed activity, the name, addresses, and telephone numbers of the PIs, the names of other key personnel, participating institutes, and the number and title of this funding opportunity. And please send letter of intent to me. My email address is included on this slide and also within the funding opportunity. And so now we'll hand this over to Dr. Minky Chatterjee so that she could present the additional information about this funding opportunity.
Hi, good morning, afternoon, and evening. We're so happy to have you here. Right now, I'm going to switch gears and elaborate on a few things that Dr. Martin was talking about. I will talk about the UG3 planning phase and then about the UH3 phase, just so you can get a sense of what that consists of. So the UG3 planning phase is the time when the grantees will form and solidify their collaborations and partnerships between scientists in the US and the LMICs in Africa using an MPI approach. So we want to see at least one US scientist and at least one scientist from the African LMIC. That US scientist that is proposed must have documented experience conducting research and training activities within the LMIC setting. And the MPI plan should clearly delineate roles and responsibilities. We also want to see the formation of an external advisory board with subject matter expertise to supplement or complement the areas of expertise of the research team members. Next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Just now, I'm going to transition, talk a bit about the approaches that we have in mind for the UG3 planning phase. These approaches may include, but are not limited to, the following. One thing is the development, translation, and pilot testing of new measures or tools or methods for recruitment, retention, and data collection. The development and testing of methods for biosamples or environmental sample collection, the collation, integration, harmonization of existing data sets into one single database or linked databases, the addition of AD-related data to non-AD studies is another thing that we're interested in population representative studies. Another thing is the development of a sampling frame or adapting existing sampling frame, and development of skills and probability-based sampling for new population representative studies for subsequent implementation in full-scale research in AD and ADRD. And lastly, development of computational infrastructure and training causal inference to support secondary data analysis. Again, these not limited to, but just to give you a sense of the types of things we're looking for. Next slide. So one thing that is a major focus of this RFA is we want to see meaningful engagement of local stakeholders. We want to see partnerships, meaningful partnerships between research scientists and other local relevant stakeholders that draw on their respective strengths so that these perspectives are integrated and both have expertise in informing the research priorities and leading to sustainability of the effort, because we're trying to build capacity in the region that's going to last. And we do want to see evidence that there will be bi-directional communication between the researchers and engaged stakeholders over the course of the entire study. And here you can see a list of the different types of stakeholders we have in mind. Again, not limited to these stakeholders, but things to think about. And I think this is a really important part of this RFA. Next slide. At NIH, we have an NIH policy for data management and sharing. It's effective now. And you should take a very close look at this. We expect you to comply with the data sharing requirements outlined in this policy. And if you get the grant, you are committing yourselves to adhering to this policy. So please take a look. Next slide. You will see this in the RFA as well. We've listed several resources that you can take a look at. You can choose to leverage these resources if you like, or propose new things, but we just wanted to make you aware of them. Next slide. Now I'll transition to the UH3, the development phase. And so the UH3 phase will support adequately powered pilot projects to investigate AD and ADRD research in Africa and to lay the foundation for future larger scale projects, because that's really what we're trying to do here. So during the UH3 phase, investigators should do the following. They should use data or resources collected during the UG3 phase. They should further develop analytic approaches or data sharing platforms. We want to see them develop mechanistic hypotheses and develop rigorous studies to test those hypotheses, and then show the feasibility and collect preliminary data to support future large-scale research projects for AD and ADRD research in Africa. So this is what we really want to see in the UH3 phase. Next slide. Some additional considerations. The application that you submit must include well-defined quantitative milestones and timelines for assessing progress, both in the UG3 phase, but also the UH3 phase. And we will be looking at these carefully. The milestone plan will require NI review and approval before the UH3 grant is awarded, and will be included in your terms of conditions of your UG3 notice of award. And successful completion of these UG3 milestones is required to transition to the UH3 award. And if you are unfamiliar with the UG3, you might want to read this link that we've put here, and it's also in the RFA. Next slide. Some additional considerations. At the completion of the UG3 planning phase, the applicant will be required to submit a detailed transition request for the UH3 research implementation phase. It's not automatic. It will undergo administrative review, and then a decision will be made whether you go to the next phase. And you have to meet your proposed milestones to be able to do that. And again, transition decisions will be based on the readiness to complete the UH3 study. And again, just to repeat, just so that it's clear, prospective applicants should note that the initial UG3 funding for the UH3 cooperative agreement does not guarantee support for the UH3, the second phase. Next slide. Also, you should know that you'll be expected to budget for the annual investigator meeting. Investigators will be expected to participate in this annual meeting. It may be virtual, maybe in person. And the annual meeting will provide a forum for investigators to share ideas, discuss opportunities for synergy, and we at NIA will organize the meeting and develop the agenda with input from all of you, from the research teams, from the awardees. But you should include funds to support travel to the meeting in your yearly budget. So make sure that you have that in your budget. Next slide. Also, we would hate for you to go through the trouble of developing an application and then having it found to be non-responsive. So make sure that you're proposing only UG3 and UH3 activities. You should only be including human beings, not non-human animals. Applications should include populations from Africa, not from elsewhere. And applications from high-income countries, high-income African countries will not be accepted. That's not responsive to this RFA. And then you should make sure to have a collaborative MPI plan, like I mentioned earlier, a description of a scientific area to be addressed, a plan for meaningful community engagement, again, like I was mentioning, and the milestones and performance metrics. So all these things, please, we would hate for you to apply and then have it be non-responsive. Please look at this checklist as you're developing your application. Next slide. Now I'm going to transition and talk about the Division of Behavioral and Social Research, which is my home. Dr. Galli and Dr. Martin are from the Division of Neuroscience, and they'll be talking about that after I am done. So our division supports research on life course health and well-being, including AD and ADRD. And we support research on aging in the life course in international settings because we want to provide opportunities to study geographic areas that vary socially, economically, culturally, and so we can look at cross-national comparisons. This type of research can really help us better understand how aging in different contexts, different institutional, policy, environmental, economic, social, cultural contexts can lead to different health and welfare outcomes to individuals and for populations. And we kind of see this as a cross-national laboratory. That's why we're so interested in sub-Saharan Africa. We're interested in seeing how different situations will lead to different outcomes, seeing if this information can help people in the countries, but also people in the US. And please, you can look at this link here. It's in the NOFO as well. You can look at our NIA BSR Global Aging webpage for more information to really understand our mission. Next slide. So some specific areas of interest to us, again, not limited to this, and again, thinking about putting the lens of how behavioral and social and economic factors influence what comes afterwards. We're interested in social determinants of health and the exposome. We're interested in psychological factors. We're interested in behavioral and functional health behaviors. And again, how those social and behavioral and economic factors could influence those health behaviors. That's kind of the link there. We are interested in data collection, both at the national level, but also at the regional and state level, particularly if you're coming from a very large country, it's a start to start at the regional or state level. And we are very interested in probability-based sampling with a long-term goal to possibly conduct a nationally representative study. And also we are very interested in multidisciplinary studies that are harmonized with the HRS and HCAP. You can read more about those at those links, and you'll see they're very multidisciplinary. Those studies collect data on economics, health, biomarkers. There's a lot going on there, and you can look at that. And again, this just gives you a sense. We're not limited to this, but this gives you a sense of what we're interested in. So now I think I should transition to Dr. Gallet. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Minky. Hi, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us today. So in the first couple of slides, I will be briefly talking about the mission of the Division of Neuroscience and some specific areas of research interest at the Division of Neuroscience. And then I will go through some review criteria that are specific to this funding announcement. And then I will give you some important dates for you all to remember. So at the Division of Neuroscience, our mission is to foster and support extramural research and training to further the understanding of not only the dementias of old age, but also of the neural and behavioral processes associated with the normal aging brain. An area of a special emphasis for us is brain behavior relationship. And an important component of this division is the support of basic clinical and epidemiological studies of AD and related dementias of aging. Next slide, please. So here on this slide, we have a list of specific areas of research interest at the Division of Neuroscience, but our areas of interest are not limited to this list. So if you don't see your area of research here, or if you have any questions about the scope, please reach out to us. So the areas of research interest at the Division of Neuroscience include studies on novel genetic variants that may have a strong genetic contribution to AD/ADRD biology, studies on the association of highly prevalent comorbidities such as cardiovascular risk factors, diabetes, peripheral arterial disease with cognitive impairment and AD/ADRD phenotypes, studies on environmental exposures, including environmental toxicants, air pollution, and diet, the studies that look at the role of infectious agents, including COVID-19 in cognitive impairment and AD/ADRD, studies on the etiology of age-related AD/ADRD subtypes, studies that include genetic and other omics data, such as ApoE status, genome-wide association studies, or whole sequencing, epigenetics, transcriptomics, metabolomics, and proteomics. Neurobiological and neuropathological studies, those with neuroimaging endpoints, including but not limited to the use of novel PET ligands, cerebrospinal fluid, or blood-based biomarkers such as beta amyloid, tau, and neurofilament, and autopsy tissue when possible. Studies on physiology and other comorbidities such as obesity, hypertension, and other vascular contributions to cognitive impairment, stress measures, role of inflammation or immune systems, and mental health history, and identification of underlying mechanisms of resilience, such as protective genotypes of cognitive reserve. And as I mentioned earlier, our areas of interest are not limited to this list, so please reach out to us if you have any questions on the scope. Next slide, please. Okay, so in the next couple of slides, I will go through some review criteria that are specific to this RFA. Next slide. So significance criteria that are specific to this RFA are how adequately did the investigators describe the relevance of the proposed work in the African LMIC? How likely is it that achieving the aims of the proposed project will lead to the development of new research resources for AD/ADRD neuroscience research in Africa? To what extent will resources created serve to improve or expand research on AD/ADRD neuroscience research in Africa? And how well will the research infrastructure created and or data collected support research that could inform future preventive or therapeutic intervention strategies for Africa, US, and globally? Next slide, please. Investigator criteria that are specific to this RFA include how adequately does the senior PI demonstrate an ongoing record of effectively leading multidisciplinary teams in LMIC settings. How appropriate is the expertise of the research team for the types of data to be collected, included, and or the tools or techniques needed to establish or expand the infrastructure proposed that includes genetic or environmental, epidemiology, exposure assessment, cell or molecular sciences, engineering, database management. If the project focuses on a particular population, how appropriate is the expertise and experience of the research team in engaging with those populations and relevant community partners? Next slide, please. And lastly, environment criteria specific to this NOFO or how likely is it that the proposed project will enhance the ability of the African institution to perform AD/ADRD research in the future, and how adequate are the plans for sustainability of research resources within the African LMIC institution. So these are all criteria that are specific to this funding announcement, and reviewers will be looking at this. These are in addition to the review criteria that are general to all funding announcements. Next slide, please. Okay, so some very important dates for you all to remember. Next slide. So applications are due February 14, 2024. These applications will be reviewed in June of 2024, and they will go to Advisory Council review in October of 2024. The earliest start date for applications that are going to be funded will be November of 2024. Next slide. Great, so next slide, we have our contact information here. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions or if you would like to discuss your application, discuss your aims or your interests with us. You can reach out to Dr. Damali Martin and myself at the Division and Dr. Minky Chatterjee at the Division of Behavioral and Social Research. Next slide. Okay, thank you. And I guess we are now opening this up for any questions.
Yes, and there are a few questions in the Q&A. I'm just going to stop sharing. And let's go to the questions. So our first question, who qualifies as a PI from the African side in terms of education and experience? So I'm gonna go ahead and take a shot at the question, and then if my colleagues have anything to add, please feel free to jump in. So it really depends on on you and the collaboration you have with the U.S. investigator. Because this will be establishing new infrastructure, we would advise that the PI from the African side have that expertise to build and lay down the infrastructure that is required to build sustainable programs within sub-Saharan Africa. One of the things that we do want you to know, though, is we also require that you include a junior faculty member from the African Institute for purposes of succession planning. What we often find is once we start to fund these programs, that once the experienced PI from the LMIC leaves, the program may fall apart because there's no one else to take up the mantle, or, and keep things going. And so we really want to see an established PI from Africa, working with a U.S. collaborator along with a junior faculty PI that could participate in putting the application together, and that you see as one of the future leaders for research for AD and ADRD. And I'm noting that there's a raised hand, but let me ask my colleagues first if they have anything to add. No, nothing else to add. Dwayne, could we unmute Dr. Selehi? I hope that I'm saying your name correctly.
Hello.
Hello. Do you have something to add to your question?
Yes. So basically, I'm coming from a country where people are not doing much of AD or research that are related to aging, right? So I'm currently on my last step of doing a PhD, but also back home, I'm a faculty member at the university. So I was thinking of putting up a grant for this application, but I didn't know the requirements for who should be a PI and what are the required qualifications.
Yeah, so I think the best way forward is for you to reach out to all three of us, and we can meet with you and advise you as to the best options for you moving forward.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you for your interest.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Let's go to the next question from Dr. Hyacinth. To encourage future opportunities for collaboration and to support secondary analysis and combination of data with those from the US and or other parts of Africa, will the NIA be encouraging the use of specific tools for cognitive assessment? Minky, do you want to take this question?
Sure. Hi, this is a great question. So we have invested in this tool called the Harmonized Cognitive Assessment Protocol, but in a sense, it's really not a tool. The key word of it is harmonized. It started in the US, but we're starting to use it more in Africa. South Africa and Kenya are starting to work in this area. And really, what we're finding is in different contexts, they really have to adapt it. So the key thing is this HCAP I'm talking about. It's not one tool or one test. It's just that you can harmonize it at the end, and that takes some work. However, I have to say we are also accepting applications where people are using different tools, because sometimes the HCAP might not be the right thing. And but one thing I might ask you, if I speak to you, you should say what the HCAP can't do, what your thing can do, and maybe even talking about a crosswalk so that we can learn and improve the thing that we've invested in. So that's kind of a long answer. If you want to do these cross-national analyses, probably the HCAP is better, but in some cases that might not be the priority. You might want to do something else. And so I'm sorry, that's a little bit of a long answer, but and feel free to contact the three of us if you want to talk more. I think that's the best way to go. I don't know if others want to add.
Yeah, no, so if I understand you correctly and I'm summarizing correctly, we do have available tools. Minky presented, and methodology. Minky presented the HCAP as an example of that. But if you are introducing a new methodology or new tool that will work for your population, please feel free to do so. It will be great also for you to say how this tool will add synergy to the existing tools or complement the existing tools. Miriam, anything else to add? No? Okay, great. Did I capture your, okay, great, perfect. All right, next question from Dr. Brookman. So thank you for this very clear presentation. I think you mentioned that the UH3 phase should primarily use data and infrastructure from the UG3 phase. Through some pilot data can be collected. The budget is much larger for the UH3 phase. Can you clarify the nature of the expected data collection in the UG3 versus the UH3 phases? Sure. So the idea behind doing this phase approach is to allow you some time to plan and then to do a scale up or implementation. So the UG3 phase is really more about the planning phase. So what you may do, for example, in the UG3 phase is that you may want to do a focus group to see what's the best type of survey that you could develop, or to test some survey questions on a new survey tool that you have developed. And then you may get information from that focus group during the UG3 phase that will inform a better survey or more informed survey that then you could implement within the UH3 phase as you're doing your recruitment. So I hope that answers your question. Any of my colleagues could present any other examples or anything else to add? And Dr. Brickman, if that doesn't answer your question, please let us know, and we'll try to provide you with a better answer. Okay. I'm going to go to the next question. Let's see, would an application that compares populations from Africa and the US, specifically African-American cohorts, be considered responsive? Yes. As long as it focuses on building the infrastructure in Africa and it addresses some of the overall research goals that your African collaboration would like to address in their population, we will consider this responsive. Remember, the primary focus is to build research infrastructure in Africa. So your overall research goals, it looks like, is to do some cross-national studies. And so you will be able to lay down the research to do that in with your African collaborator in order to be able to do appropriate comparisons between the African and US populations. So of course, please send us your specific aims. That will enable us to better advise you. But this would be responsive as long as you're laying down infrastructure within the African population of interest. Okay, next question. NIH requires ERA Commons ID. Many institutes in Africa do not have it. How to do? Okay, let me answer this first question. So part of the RFA, there is a link in the RFA that under the frequently asked questions. If you click on that link, and we could probably put the link in the chat also if we get a chance. That link will take you to a page with this exact same question, and there are instructions as to how you could set up your ERA Commons ID. Again, if you need specific help, please do not hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll be here to help offer you additional guidance. Let's see, the notion of effort is different in Africa than USA. How to deal with this issue and many other issues which are different in Africa. I'm not sure I understand that question. So I don't know if Dr. Ikangat could raise his hand so that we could unmute him.
Sorry, who was that?
It was Dr. Jean Kanga, I believe the last pronunciation of the last name. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Ah, there he is. Could you clarify your question for us? You will need to unmute, or can we unmute him, please? Her.
I can only add.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
So when we talk about having a PI in Africa, we need to quantify how much time this person will spend on this grant. And the way we quantified effort in the United States is completely different in Africa. How this question will be dealt.
So it would be best if you reach out to us individually with your budget or relative or other issues that's relevant to how you want to quantify level of effort, and we could work with you on that. So it will probably be on a case-by-case basis. So I won't have a general answer for you right now, but if you reach out to us, we could certainly try to address your concerns. Okay. Another question. Is there a requirement to anchor this proposal within or to an ADRC or NIH funded efforts such as H3 Africa? No, there is not a requirement. The ADRCs and H3 Africa are provided as resources. We do realize that other institutes at NIH have made great investments into Africa. And so if you could utilize those resources and leverage those resources to do your research, that would be great. The same thing for NIA resources that were provided, those links were provided to you in the RFA. If you could leverage those resources, that would be great, but you don't have to. There may be other resources that you know of that you could use, or this could be a standalone program. It's completely up to you. Okay, another question. Neuroscience is suggesting great research interest. Many places in Africa do not have materials to collect this data. In some countries, they have only 1.5 T. How can we could data in these equipments do not exist? So yeah, this is, of course, it's a challenge, and it's one of the challenges that we're trying to address through the RFA. And we know that, this RFA does not answer or address all of the research that could be done throughout Africa. And we do understand that there are going to be some places that are more ready for this application than others. And so again, if you have individual questions about your interest in what you could do in terms of building infrastructure, please reach out to us. We've actually spoken to someone who has this challenge and was able to walk him through some solutions for his particular application. Sometimes it means collaborating with another country that has this and having that country add to the infrastructure. The RFA does allow for collaborations among African countries also. So there are many ways in which you could think about this. And again, we're willing to work with you to see what's the best answer here. Anything to add from Minky and Miriam? No? Okay. Okay. Will the inclusion of an NGO that specializes on a particular population be allowed to be included in the research team? Yes. We do list an NGO as one of the stakeholders that we would like to see you include if possible. Of course, you decide which are the best stakeholders for you to include based off the research area that you are going to study. But we do believe that inclusion of stakeholders, as Dr. Chatterjee pointed out during the presentation, is key to success in building sustainability for research anywhere. So we highly encourage you to do that. Okay. Next question. How many applications do you anticipate funding? We anticipate funding up to 4 applications under this award. Okay, this is a brilliant opportunity, but the timeline is very tight given the expectations of submission from our institute 1 month before the deadline for review. Will this be offered again? Unfortunately, we are unable to provide you any information as to whether this will be offered again. We would have to go back and solicit this from our leadership at the institute and through our council. And it depends on the response that we get to this RFA. We would say that the application due date is February of next year. We actually made the time between publication of this RFA and the application due date much longer than usual for this very same reason. And throughout the process, we will be evaluating how things work out. And so we will use this information to inform how we move forward in the future. But at this time, we don't know what that would look like for us until we've gotten into the process. And of course, that would depend on our budget in the future also. Okay, let me stop and see if any of my colleagues would like to take additional questions, or I'm happy to keep going. No? Okay. I'm happy to keep going. Okay. What are the dynamics for the African PI who is currently a doctoral student in the US? Okay. So the RFA is only going to support PIs at the African Institute and a US PI. If you are a doctorate student in the US and you are connected to a US or African PI that's applying for this opportunity, you could seek ways in which you could participate within that research team. That will be up to you. However, given that you are a doctorate student in the US, if you do plan to go back to Africa to pursue your research, we just want to let you know that we have an exciting opportunity that will be coming up for you in the future that was just approved by our September Council to support junior faculty investigators in LMICs. So if you are planning on returning to Africa to build up your research infrastructure there, and you're interested in learning about that funding opportunity, once that RFA is published, we'll be more than happy to share information with you. Okay. Next question. Does the African PI have to be a full professor, an associate professor, or an adjunct professor? We prefer that the person is a full professor or associate professor, a full professor or associate professor, or employed by the African Institute. Okay, it's what we should say. As long as you have the expertise and you have demonstrated in your application that the Institute is willing to support your research as part of their institute, and that you would describe also within the description of your environment and on your biosketch, that will be fine. Again, I would advise that you reach out to us and talk to us more about that directly to ensure that there's that we know about everything within your case, and that we could give you the most appropriate response for you. Okay, next question. What should be the maximum budget for a single application? And are the multi-site collaborations within African setting allowed? So the maximum budget for the planning phase, which is the UG3 phase, is $400,000 direct cost US. And the maximum budget for the UH3 phase, which is your implementation phase, is $800,000 direct cost US. And yes, we do allow multi-site collaboration within the African setting. We like collaboration, so definitely, if you can, we encourage you to do that. Okay. Next question. I just answered this question, the level of financial support. So I'm going to go ahead and skip over this. Thank you for the webinar, Damali and team. Good to see you after the Nairobi meeting. Oh, good to see you too. How big is the budget in total? Just answered. So I'm just going to move on to the next question. Okay, I'm just going to have Minky address this question. Are the tools in the HCAP education dependent? That is one of the problems with the tools, since educational level tends to influence the performance of some of these tools.
This is a great question, Dr. Hyacinth, because we had exactly this problem in South Africa, and they had to use different tests. So the thing to know about the HCAP, except for the US and England, the tests that different countries use are different because the context is different. Like in India, they did the HCAP, but because they have such a huge illiterate population, they had to change some of the tests. Some of the tests didn't work because people couldn't even write, you know what I mean? They had to do things differently. So we're really trying hard, you know what I mean? All the grantees who are working on HCAP in lower literacy settings are trying very hard to find ways to still measure cognitive performance, but not relying on education or literacy. So this is a terrific question and an important research topic actually in and of itself. So thank you for the question.
Great, thank you. And there was an additional comment, I'm just going to read it, that the NIH toolbox, for instance, worked well for us in prior study in Nigeria, but not sure how this fits with harmonization, which is becoming very important. Thank you so much, Minky. Oh, you're welcome, Dr. Brickman. I'm glad we were able to answer your question. Let's see. A follow-up to the question on tools for assessment. Can one use the MOCA? On the study, I did cognitive dysfunction in patients with epilepsy. I used the MOCA and the outcome was impressive. Yes, if you have identified a tool that is going to work for you, you could introduce a new tool. We are very open to you doing that. Okay.
Can I add quickly something?
Oh, yeah, please.
Also, it depends on the intention of the tool, right? If you're trying to use some sort of screening instrument, it's going to be a lot shorter than an HCAP. When you're doing a nationally representative study and you're trying to estimate the prevalence of dementia in the country. So the MOCA could be perfectly fine for one thing and not as appropriate for another. So it all depends on the intent of the use of the instrument. But thanks for the good question, though. That's a good question.
Thank you. All right. Can other countries outside the US and Africa with ADRD expertise be involved as co-investigators? Okay, so the RFA is really meant to build collaborations between US and African institutes and investigators. Because the budget is so limited and because we want to make sure as much of the budget goes towards the African Institute, we will allow those investigators coming from other high-income countries to act as consultants, but not as co-investigators. However, if there are other low-income countries within Africa that want to serve as a co-investigator on the award, we will allow that. And again, you know, if this is very specific to your case, we encourage you to reach out to us and so that we are providing you the best advice specific to your case. Anything else to add? No? Okay, great. Can a U.S. researcher partner with faculty members and clinicians across government medical institutions across Africa? Yes, as long as the it's a U.S. African collaboration, that is fine. And again, we would encourage you to reach out to us and let us know specifically what you are doing. One of the things I do want to point out again is in terms of the budget, particularly for the planning phase, the budget could only go so far. So if you are collaborating or creating a network within Africa, I would advise that you not go above 3 or 4 collaborators because then the budget becomes very thin. So again, just think about what it is that you want to do, what you want to accomplish, who your best collaborators are, and of course, reach out to us if you have additional questions. Let's see. Sorry, I got into the webinar late because the calendar conflicts. Yes. Is there only one submission deadline? Yes, there is. For this RFA, the submission application deadline is February 14th of 2024. And late applications will not be accepted. And so we encourage you to start the application process early and to start the submission process early. And if you have any questions about that, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Let's see, do we have to propose a project for both the UG3 and UH3? Okay, so you have to propose milestones for both the UG3 and the UH3 phase. So a milestone is really a statement that is measurable and that states how you're going to reach your overall research goal. So a simple way to look at this is if you state that you are going to recruit 100 people to your study, in your UG3 phase, you may want to start planning how you're going to recruit this. So your milestones would be to, for example, reach out to stakeholders within your community. That might be a milestone 1. Milestone 2 might be to create a tool and do some focus group investigations and so on. And then within your UH3 phase, you're actually going to start the recruitment. So your milestone might be to recruit 20 patients a month in month 1, recruit another 20 patients in month 2, so on and so forth. We did include a link that provides examples of how to present your milestones and projects. And again, if you have questions, please reach out to us. We do like to take a look at your Pacific Aims page where we encourage you to summarize what your milestones will be for each aim. And so if you send us your Pacific Aims page, we'll be able to better advise you and to ensure that you're on the right track. But we do expect you to propose what you're going to do during both phases of the application. If you don't, then your application will not be accepted for review. Okay, next question. Can you clarify the expected breadth of stakeholder engagement consultation expected during the UH3 phase, considering that this area, ADRD, is new in most LMICs in Africa, and there's a need for local ownership and stakeholder buy-in? So that's really up to you. We made some suggestions for stakeholders, but those are just suggestions. They're not limited to the list that we've put together. But we expect you as the researchers who are familiar with your populations and what's available within the population to be able to let us know what you think are the best stakeholders are for you to engage in. And you have to describe that and why you chose those stakeholders within your application. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, please feel free to elaborate. What qualifies as meaningful collaboration with an LMIC partner for a USPI to qualify for this RFA? Also, can a mid-career faculty in the US be one of the multiple PIs for this application? Okay, so meaningful collaboration means that there is ongoing work or a partnership between the African investigator and the USPI. We do realize that some of these partnerships might be new. And so it will be really up to you to describe what you've done in forming these partnerships, the work that you've done together, and then go from there. We do find that, in my experience, the applications that do well are the ones that have longstanding established partnerships and collaborations, and that could demonstrate how successful those collaborations have been. Either through some type of foundation that has been laid down, research publications, and so on. In terms of whether a mid-career faculty in the US can be one of the multiple PIs on the application, yes, but we would encourage that the lead USPI have experience in working within an LMIC setting. So we want the person to know what to anticipate and to have experience in addressing some of the issues within LMICs. Let me stop and ask if my colleagues have addition to add. No, nothing. Okay, great. Okay, you are welcome, Dr. Roberts. I'm glad this was helpful. Do you need preliminary data? Again, because this is to lay down research infrastructure, the key here is really infrastructure. So the reason why we're doing this is because we do realize that if someone was to submit a grant in this area, trying to propose research in Africa without any preliminary data or without any demonstration of feasibility, under normal circumstances, this would be very hard. And so what this RFA does is that it allows you to build up the preliminary data that you would need for an investigator-initiated award. And so what we need in terms of this application is just for you to demonstrate that you have the support and able to lay down the infrastructure that you need to do the research. And so we're not looking for primary data from research. What we're looking for is feasibility in you laying down the infrastructure, what your overall research question would be, how significant it will be to address the problem within your population, and then how sustainable this research will be in the future that will enable you to be able to come in with investigator-initiated awards in the future. I hope that answered your question. Could you please expand upon this? The US scientists must have documented experience conducting research and training activities within LMICs. Yes. So we want the US scientists to have an understanding of what it's like to do research in LMICs. And we believe that that understanding comes from previous work in LMIC setting. So if you have an ongoing collaboration with an LMIC investigator, and it doesn't have to be an African investigator, it could be any LMIC, or if you have worked in a LMIC setting in which you have managed a project or research project, those are considered, for example, documented experiences in conducting research and training activities within LMIC settings. And again, if you have questions about this particular statement within the RFA, please send us those questions, reach out to us. You could send us what you believe would be documented experience for you, and we will be able to access that and see whether you will meet the criteria that we're looking for here. But we want these projects to be successful, and we believe that success, particularly since the awards are going towards a U.S. investigator, we want to ensure that the U.S. investigator understands what it's like to work within an LMIC, understand how to address challenges that may arise so that the project is successful, and also understands how to build successful collaborations with LMIC PIs. Are additional co-PI co-applicants from Europe allowed? So we do allow other established PIs or co-PIs from outside the US to act as consultants on the project, but they cannot be a co-PI on the application, because this application is really aiming to encourage US African collaborations. Okay, can the research budget include efforts in science communication to target a population in an effort to address stigma and increase future research recruitment? Absolutely. And again, it depends on what your research question is and what you're trying to accomplish. But we do realize that in many applications, that science communication and dissemination of information is going to be very important. And so, yes, that is allowed, as long as you could provide a strong justification for doing it within your application, and include that in your budget justification. But yes, very, very good to include science communication and dissemination. We're fully supportive of that. Are caregiver studies considered for funding? Again, this depends on what it is that you're doing. And this is an area that really will be covered by our colleague in the Division of Behavioral and Social Research. So again, if you send us your specific aims, she could take a look at it and see if it's covered under her division. Minky, do you want to comment more?
Sure. These studies would be covered and considered for funding, especially if you talk about how social and behavioral, economic and policy factors influence how caregiving is delivered in a country. So please go ahead and contact me if you're interested. You just email all of us, actually. I think that's the best way to go, and we can take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see. Thank you so much for answering my questions. I'll be sure to reach out soon. Please do. My struggle now is ensuring that we make changes to a tool that would allow harmonizations. Okay, that sounds great. So we'll look forward to hearing from you, Dr. Hyacinth, and thank you so much for your interest. Let's see. We are looking good on time. I'm going to try and go through as many more questions as I can. Let's see, the definition of professor in Africa is different from professor in US. In Africa, like Nigeria, there's nothing like associate professor. You're either a professor or not. I guess a reader in Nigeria can be related as an associate professor. And okay, so if you have questions about whether you can serve as a PI on a study, please reach out to us. We do recognize that there are differences in the way positions are described within the US and in other LMICs, including in Africa. Really what we're looking for from the African PI is for them to demonstrate that they're capable of doing the research that is proposed under the in their proposal. And so again, if you have questions about whether you're eligible, please reach out to us, and we could address your specific questions. I truly appreciate your African emphasis in this competition. Sure, absolutely. We're happy to be part of this initiative. We're really excited about it also. Let's see, Dr. Rajan, do you plan to share the webinar slides? Yes, the webinar is being recorded and we will share the slides online. We will send out a link to the recording and the slides once we have all the information put together and everything is prepared. Does the advisory board need to be based in Africa? Advisory board could be either from the US or Africa. We would advise, it's great to have members from both entities and to ensure that your advisory board is coming with the expertise that they would need to help you to be successful in your proposal. So yes, that's a great question. And I would personally encourage advisory board members from both the African side and also the US side. Okay, Dr. Moshi, the research area is so new in Africa, yes. Can NIH consider to allow USPI having more effort than the site PI since she will be much needed every step of, okay. So we really wanted to ensure that the funds that are being used really goes towards the African Institute, because the purpose is to really build research infrastructure in Africa. I would encourage you to reach out to us and talk to us more about your particular effort. We do realize that in some cases, this may be a bit of a sacrifice for the USPI in doing and working with this collaboration. So reach out to us and talk to us more about your specific question, but we want to encourage you and others to really consider ensuring that the budget that you're allocating to Africa is 60% or more, and as required in the RFA, and that the effort that you're laying down is going to go towards building the infrastructure in Africa. We understand that this is a it's a challenge. And we're willing to work with you to see how we could get this done. Please, can we have the reference to the meta-analysis highlighted? Yes, I could put a link for the reference in the slides so that you could access it. So I will be sure to do that. Is South Africa considered an LMIC country? So I would encourage you to go to the link in the RFA. There's a link to the World Bank where there's a list of countries that are either classified as low, middle income or high middle income. And on the slide, we provided additional information about this. So if South Africa falls within any one of those income groups, then you will be allowed to come in under this RFA. So visit the World Bank website for a list of those countries. And again, reach out to us if you want to double check and have additional questions. What if an investigator working in LMIC in previous years, but that country no longer is considered an LMIC? Yes, absolutely. I understand that sometimes economies and countries change. If you have that experience working in LMIC, again, reach out to us. We could discuss your specific expertise and experience with you. Okay. Do you say the plan is to fund 4 studies in this call? Yes. We have the budget. We were approved for a budget to fund up to 4 studies in this call. Okay, I think I addressed this question. Let's see, do large non-university research institutes in Africa count as potential partners? Or does the main collaboration have to be an African university? This is a good question. I would encourage you to reach out to us and tell us more about the Non-University Research Institute in Africa. Again, we just want to, part of the part of the review criteria is really the environment. And we are looking at the feasibility of the environment to support the research that's being proposed within the application, or to support the research infrastructure that's being proposed in the application. And so I would encourage you to reach out to us and talk to us more about your particular question. Can you please share the grant opportunity? Yes, definitely. We will be sharing that because we want to support junior investigators and LMICs. And so when it opens, we will definitely be sharing that opportunity with you. So I think those are all the questions I have so far. We have 15 minutes remaining. So let's see if there are any other questions will pop up. But in the meantime, anything else from my colleagues would like any closing?
There's one question in the chat asking whether this RFA will can be used to establish an epidemiologic cohort study.
Yes, absolutely. It will be, so again, the budget, you have to look at the budget and what you're proposing to do. It could certainly be used to show feasibility of establishing a cohort. You may also want to look at what existing cohorts are capable of doing AD research in Africa too. So one of the things that we're interested in is if there is a cohort that's not currently doing AD that is capable of doing AD and ADRD research, we encourage you to use those also. Okay, so I think this is the end. I thank you all again for joining us today and for your interest in this RFA. We're really excited. Based off of the questions and all of your attendance, we expect a really robust response to this RFA. And again, please do not hesitate to reach out to us between now and February 14th. Hopefully sooner rather than later. The sooner you reach out and the earlier you reach out to us, the better it will be. And we will be happy to speak with you and offer you more guidance. So thank you all once again, and have a great day, afternoon, night, wherever you are. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, bye.